coconut water. Fave. It has been a minute. I don't even know if I remember my intro. It's been like so long, but let's give it a try. Let's give it a go. Hey guys, welcome back to Live, Love, Life, and Travel, where we act. No, that's not it. I don't remember my intro. Okay, let's just make a new intro, guys. Welcome to Live, Love, Life, and Travel, where I talk about travel, living, and loving life and traveling. I specialize in, I like to talk about traveling on a budget and traveling as a woman and traveling as a solo woman and traveling as a woman of color. And today we are going to talk about Vietnam versus Thailand. If you are an OG watcher, you know I spent an ample amount of time in Thailand, mainly Chiang Mai, Thailand. I was there pretty much in and out for about 4 years straight. And when I say in and out, that basically means every 90 days as a foreigner, as a tourist, you have to leave the country. And I would either go to Malaysia, Laos, or Cambodia, and I would stay for a couple of weeks to a couple of months. And then my base was in Chiang Mai, Thailand, even though I did spend some time in Bangkok. So I have lots of experience in Thailand. Right after I decided to leave Thailand for like good, not for like forever, but Thailand is no longer my base, I decided to go to Vietnam for a while, but I was only there for like a month and a half. So just to be transparent, my knowledge of Chiang Mai and Thailand is way more than it is Vietnam, because I was just there for a month and a half and I was just in Hanoi, and I spent a lot of time in Chiang Mai, Bangkok, and also South Thailand, Koh Phangan, but I've been like all over. When I'm comparing Vietnam today, I'm mostly going to be comparing Hanoi versus Thailand via like Chiang Mai, Bangkok. So we're going to go through a few different categories and just compare the two and see which place would be right for you as a traveler, as a digital nomad, as a female, as a young person, as a solo female, as a person of color, and see what will match for you and what you might be looking for. Of course, this is relevant to the fact that when this whole pandemic sort of blows over, you guys can start looking ahead of time, saving ahead of time, planning ahead of time. So when you are allowed to go to either Thailand or Vietnam, you're prepared. So first, we are gonna start with how it just feels to be in either places. The vibe, the atmosphere. Hanoi to me is basically like the perfect middle. Let's say Chiang Mai is perfect for you because it's a smaller city, it's not too crazy or chaotic, there's a community feel to it, it's great if you're a digital nomad, great if you're working online. However, it's just a bit too slow for you. There's pretty much absolutely no nightlife in Chiang Mai, like at least when I was there. But Bangkok has everything. It's fast-paced, it has a nightlife, it's modern. However, it may be just a bit too much for you. It's too big, too noisy, too loud, too crowded, too hot, too dirty, and maybe you might have a harder time finding a community there as an expat. I feel like Hanoi is like the perfect middle. Like for me, Hanoi, even though it is a city and it's quite a busy city, it still has somewhat of a smaller town or a smaller city feel. And I would explain more of that when I make my video about the things you will love about Vietnam and the things you might hate about Vietnam, which should be coming up shortly. But it does have somewhat of a smaller city feel. You can find a community there. There's a lot of activities going on there. There's a lot of things to do. A lot of a variety of places to eat and see and sit and cafes, and it's trendy, but it still has a lot of Vietnamese culture there, and it has an amazing nightlife. Like Hanoi sometimes doesn't even feel like it sleeps sometimes, but it doesn't have that bigness and that tallness that Bangkok has, where like the skyrise buildings and the tons of traffic. Even though there's traffic, so you'll probably be spending most of your time in Old Quarter, which is an UNESCO heritage site, World Heritage Site in Hanoi, and so you'll probably spend most of your time there, and it's actually a lot more spread out than people think it is. Like me and my friend walked across this big ass bridge to the other side of Hanoi thinking that we're out of Old Quarter, but that was still actually Old Quarter. So it's actually quite large. It takes up a lot of space, and most travelers, expats, foreigners, at least, you know, stay in Old Quarter, or at least start their travels out in Old Quarter. So that'll probably be where you are, and it is absolutely amazing. So it's kind of like Old Town in Chiang Mai, where most foreigners, most travelers, most expats at least stay in that area, or at least begin their travels or living in Chiang Mai. They usually begin in that area, so it's kind of the same thing. Old Town, again, feels more like a small town. Hanoi has a city feel, but it still feels like a small town package. I would explain it better because I will go in detail about it in my What I Love About Vietnam video, because it's one of the most, it's the thing that I love the most about Hanoi. So again, if you want something that's in between Bangkok and Chiang Mai, then Hanoi is perfect. But if you don't really want the chaos, if you don't really want or need the nightlife, if you really don't want any type of city feel whatsoever, then Chiang Mai would be better for you. And of course, Bangkok offers that big metropolitan city feel like a New York or something like that. When you want everything at your fingertips, you want diversity, you want an array of food choices and cuisine, you want the nightlife, you want the fast pace feel of something like that, then Bangkok, of course, would be your option. So now let's talk about finance, about money. So Vietnam is pretty inexpensive, and I was in Hanoi, which is a city. Cities tend to be a little bit more expensive than rural areas or smaller town areas. So even though I was in Hanoi, I found it quite inexpensive. I personally believe Hanoi was cheaper than Thailand. I would say that it's like Chiang Mai prices. If you've been to Chiang Mai, Thailand, it's like Chiang Mai prices are basically half the prices of Bangkok prices and South Thailand. North Thailand is usually cheaper than Bangkok and South Thailand. So I would say Vietnam or Hanoi, where I was, is equivalent in the same sort of prices as Chiang Mai, so a little less expensive than Bangkok. So I mostly stayed in hostels, and I would say I paid around $7-8 per pretty nice hostel. And for food is like super inexpensive. Like if you're eating street food and local food, going out for drinks, going out for treats and stuff like that, sightseeing is pretty inexpensive. So it's really inexpensive to travel and to eat and live and stay and sleep in Hanoi, Vietnam. I would also say the same thing for Chiang Mai. The conversion rate from baht in US dollars have been going up. I believe it's like 3,500 baht per 100 US dollars, 30 something baht per dollar. I find that living in Chiang Mai was really inexpensive. Accommodations were really cheap. Eating out was really cheap. For me, you have to try really hard to blow all your money in either places. Now, Bangkok is the more expensive of all the places. Bangkok, I would say in Chiang Mai, you can live a comfortable life around $600 minimum. Now, if you want, you can actually do it cheaper than that. There have been YouTubers and vloggers who have shown that they have lived in Chiang Mai for half that price and still having a beer every once in a while, going out with their friends. But if you want to have everything at your fingertips, you want to live comfortably, you want to have a coffee when you want to go out when you want, I would say $600 minimum and up. And then for Bangkok, I would say $1,000 to $1,500 US dollars minimum to live comfortably. You can always do things cheaper, you can always do things more expensive. It depends what you want. But when I say comfortably, I mean going out when you want, eat what you want. You don't have to budget just for a Starbucks coffee or anything like that. You can kind of just live a little bit more carefree without constantly holding onto your pockets. I would say the same for Vietnam. It's very similar to Chiang Mai. I would say $600 a month to live comfortably. Probably more. Probably maybe a slightly more, because I think accommodations in Hanoi, Vietnam is a little bit more expensive. From what I saw, you can get a relatively decent, nice studio apartment for a little over $200, less than $300, and of course the price can always go up. Where in Chiang Mai, I found places that were less than $200. You guys have seen that if you're OG subscribers, that I had a nice studio apartment that was $120 something with utilities, big window, fully furnished, security system, and everything like that. And of course, you can get really nice places, penthouses for $600 US dollars a month. From what I saw in Vietnam, I think accommodations are slightly more expensive than Chiang Mai, but food is really cheap and everything else is really inexpensive. So I would say like between $600 and $700 for Hanoi, $600, and this is minimum. It can always get more expensive and you can always cut it down, but you're gonna be on a shoestring budget. But like minimum $600 for Chiang Mai, $700 for Hanoi, and $1,000 to $1,500 minimum for Bangkok, in my humble opinion. So let's talk about accommodations. Again, I didn't stay in any apartments or any hotels in Hanoi. I pretty much just stuck to a hostel. I stayed in a really, really nice hostel. The hostel's culture in Hanoi is really nice. The hostels are usually quite inexpensive, but really well maintained, clean, nice to look at, nice decor, usually come with free breakfast and all those things, security, safe. So, and I was again paying about $7 a night per bed, and I didn't really go anywhere else because I stayed the month and a half in Hanoi because I just loved Hanoi so freaking much. But when I did go online and kind of like, you know, hostel hunt, it seemed like the prices were all relatively the same. Some were slightly cheaper and some were slightly more expensive. Now when it comes to Chiang Mai, I'm like the opposite. I never stayed in a hostel in Chiang Mai. I never stayed in a hotel in Chiang Mai. I only just did service apartments, and I tell you, Chiang Mai is the best for like service apartments from my travel experience anyway. It's so easy to get a place. Like, they make it so freaking easy for expats and travelers in Chiang Mai and Thailand in general. I mean, I don't know how easy it is today, but back before the world went crazy, it was really, really, really easy. You didn't even have to get an agent, but you could get an agent if you want to. I've made like how to find an apartment in Chiang Mai videos before. It's on my YouTube channel, but you can just drive around and find something. If you don't know what a service apartment is, a service apartment is basically an apartment that's already set up for you. You don't have to hook any utilities up. You don't have to go furniture shopping. It is just done. You just move in. It's move in ready. They cater those to foreigners and expats. I lived in 3 and I lived in Chiang Mai, and all of them, one was the most expensive one. It was like over $200, and it was just super boutique, super cute, outside of the city. And I stayed in another one again that was like $100 and something $20 with utilities, and I love that. It's the Sherry Apartments in Chiang Mai near Nihimans, near Maya Mall. Those are my favorite. That's my favorite one I stayed at because it's near the cuteness, is near the cafes and the shops and the galleries and the hipster places, but it's like it's like in between, right? It's near that stuff, but it's still near a lot of like local foods and local street foods and local shops and just locals in general, so you're not completely surrounded by just Westerners. I love the Surrey Apartments. Amazing. She has 2. And when it was open in high season, it was almost impossible to get a place there because it was such a good deal. And then I also lived in Old Town, and I paid about $100 a month for like a 1-bedroom guest house room, right? And I stayed there for so long because the family loved me and I grew attached to them. So when it comes to Bangkok and accommodations, I would say that Bangkok does a great job in providing a variety of accommodations for a variety of prices that's really well done. What I've seen in the last few years is that a lot of really touristy or well-traveled places have started building hostels to accommodate a certain type of group. And as digital nomads of a certain age, like, you will see less and less and less of the youth hostels happening now, and more and more and more of the boutique hostels that's catered to digital nomads and to people that's a bit older, like mid-20s, early 30s and beyond, where they have really good internet, where they have workstations. Like, even in Bali right now, I know this is not about Bali, but Bali, a lot of the hostels actually will have separate co-working spaces that's attached to their hostels and their guest houses. So that's kind of been the trend that I've been seeing happening. But I feel like it started with Bangkok. Bangkok has amazing places to stay, and again, for any budget you have, you can find a place in Bangkok. You want to stay at youth hostel for like a couple of dollars a night for a room that's relatively clean, relatively safe, you know, relatively comfortable. Or if you want to stay at boutique hostels that's really, really posh and modern and sleek. If you want to stay in sort of more hostels that's geared to digital nomadness, you can stay. They even have, like, you know how they have co-working spaces? They have co-working hostels and hotels now in Bangkok where it's basically catered to digital nomads. And then of course you have your hotels, right? But I never really stayed in the hotels in Bangkok. I mostly stuck to hostels, boutique hostels, capsule hostels, really, really nice hostels. And maybe I'll do a whole video of the best places to stay if you're a digital nomad and a person of a certain age. Because like for me, like youth hostels is kind of like gone in my past now. Like I don't mind staying there for a night. I don't mind going there for a drink, but staying there, no. I would say all three places probably you have no problem finding accommodations for in your price range. Now let's talk about food. Everybody always talks about food when it comes to traveling. There's entire travel channels dedicated to just food. Chiang Mai in Bangkok, but since I spend most of my time in Chiang Mai food is so good, and I think the local food is what I actually cater to or gravitate to more in Chiang Mai. They have a variety of different cuisines. You can find Western food to, you know, Italian to Mexican to American, but the Northern Thai dishes are so freaking good and so delicious and so cheap. You can't go wrong with Chiang Mai, and Chiang Mai does street food so good. Chiang Mai is the king and queen of street food in my opinion. They are boss at that. They have the Sunday markets and all the markets throughout the week, the Saturday markets, the weekend markets, and art markets and stuff like that, and you just go there and you just eat, and everything's so cheap. Everything's so delicious. I miss Chiang Mai food. And Bangkok does really good street food too. If you're like a chicken person and you like chicken, you know, like me, Thailand does chicken so well. You can find such good chicken in Bangkok, Chiang Mai, and even south, like Koh Phangan, Koh Tao. You can find like the grilled chicken on a stick, so tender with some sticky rice and some spicy sauce. Just so simple but so perfect. So Bangkok does street food well as too. I just don't see a lot of big markets of street food in Bangkok, but you will see the street food stands sort of scattered about. But since Bangkok is such a large metropolitan area, you have such a ton or giant variety of food choices from different Thai cuisines, from north, south, central, or whatever, Thai fusion cuisines, but from all over the world, American, Japanese, Mexican, Italian, sushi, and food is amazing. And also I would say the food is still well priced in Bangkok. Of course, a little bit more expensive than Chiang Mai, but still well priced. Now let's talk about Vietnamese food. Vietnamese food is delicious. Like, if you go to Vietnam, you have to eat the food, and I like their sort of culture of street food in Hanoi. Unlike Chiang Mai, there's also not these markets of just street food, and there are not a lot of just stands or carts of street food outside, but you'll see like the old, I would say, auntie Vietnamese women that look like, you know, maybe they come from the countryside, and they have like a stick, and they have like the buckets of food and ingredients, and they just like walk around with it, and they have like little stools, like little squatter stools. They're really short, and you just stop them and they will cook it right there. Like, they'll fry it up an egg or cook whatever it is and just hand it to you. And if you aren't already at a restaurant, because it's really a common in Hanoi, like even if you're at a restaurant, to stop the street food women on the streets and still order food from them and just eat it with your food at the restaurant as a side or appetizer, or you're still hungry after your meal. But if you're not at a restaurant, they have the stools where you just you'll just be walking and it'll be like a random corner and people just sitting down eating pho. Like, it's just really good, and it's so tasty and so flavorful. FYI, try the egg coffee when you get to Vietnam. I know it sounds gross, but it's really delicious. I had egg coffee at the original coffee shop in Hanoi. So amazing. Now, the differences is, I would say, if you are a vegetarian, if you're a vegan, if you are a fruitarian, a raw vegan, and you're just traveling, you're not living there or shopping for yourself, I found it very difficult in Vietnam. When I was in Vietnam, I wasn't eating meat, and I was trying to stay away from as much animal products as possible except egg and cheese. And so I found it really hard. That was probably the most frustrating part of my stay in Vietnam, that I love just being spontaneous when I travel. I love eating street food. I love going to little hole in the walls and little mom and pop shops and stuff like that to just try things. But in Vietnam, I found that really difficult. Women who would sell the street food, a lot of them didn't really speak English at all or fluently, which is totally fine. I did wind up figuring out how to say vegan or vegetables in Vietnamese. I forgot how to say it, so don't ask. But I found out how to say it while I was there, but I still found it difficult to communicate that with the street food people or just like random mom pop hole in the wall restaurants. And a lot of stuff is meat based. Even the pho, the broth is cooked with meat broth. It was just, I found it really difficult to be spontaneous and kind of just try everything I wanted in Vietnam, because it wasn't as easy just to be like, don't put that and don't put that, in my opinion, when I was there. So I ended up eating just a lot of banh mi, like a lot of banh mi egg and cheese, a lot of banh mi egg, a lot of banh mi vegetables, which is just kind of like a sandwich. We even found a vegan banh mi place while I was there. There was a couple of vegan restaurants near where I was staying in Old Quarter, but they were really expensive, so we only went there like a few times. So I would say that if you have any dietary restrictions because of ethic or just because of health, you might find it a bit more difficult in Vietnam. However, if you do not, you will enjoy Vietnam very much. The last week of my stay in Vietnam, I did just say like, you know what, F it, I'm going to just eat what I want, because I felt like I was really missing out. Like every time you would Google like the best places to eat in Vietnam, it was like everything had meat in it, or meat based or something like that, or fish, beef, pork, whatever. And I would just like, I want to try the food. So I just scrapped it and I just ate whatever I wanted. And then I went back to being vegetarian for like another year or so. I'm no longer vegetarian now. I'm still mostly plant-based, but I'm no longer vegetarian. However, versus Chiang Mai and Bangkok, especially Chiang Mai. Again, if you're a vegan, vegetarian, raw vegan, fruitarian, you will find it extremely easy to move along the cuisine in Chiang Mai, because there's so many vegetarians, fruitarians, raw vegans that live in Chiang Mai that the culture kind of just caters to that, I guess. And so super easy to live that lifestyle in Chiang Mai, but also Bangkok, but Chiang Mai for sure. Transportation, I can't really speak too much on Vietnamese or transportation in Vietnam, because again, I just stayed in Hanoi, mostly Old Quarter, and you could just walk anywhere. When we got off the bus getting to Hanoi, we just took a regular taxi from the bus. So apologize, can't really speak too much on it. However, the transportation in Chiang Mai and Bangkok is very efficient and plentiful. In Chiang Mai, you have the red cars. They look like kind of little tiny fire trucks. I forgot what they're called, like sung tongs or something like that. You have the red car, the white car, the blue car, the yellow car. You have all different cars that goes in different parts of Chiang Mai. Most travelers only take the red car. If you're not living there, if you're not an expat, you would probably just only take the red car. What a lot of travelers don't know is that the red car within the city center, within Old Town, has a set price. The price is usually on top of the sung tong, or top of the red car, right above the window. Most travelers just don't look up and see it. I think it's 30 baht, which is like $1, a little less than $1, to travel within the Old Town, within the city. Now, if you're going outside the city, it's going to cost you more, but as soon as you walk up to the window and ask the price, they're going to know that you don't know the price, and it will set you a higher price. So if you stop it and you're going within the city, just stop, get on top, get in the truck, get out, and hand in the 30 baht, or whatever the price is now. It might have been higher now because it's been, again, a couple years since I've been in Chiang Mai, but it's on the top of the car, so it's there. Another thing that a lot of new expats in Chiang Mai might not know as well is that there are different type of cars, again, that goes in different parts of Chiang Mai. When I lived outside of the city, I was taking the red car all the way to like 15 minutes outside of the city, and it was costing me a few hundred baht. I found out that there's actually, again, different cars designated at different parts of Chiang Mai, and right outside of Old Town, you can catch a white sung tong or a white car, and it's like, it cost me 5 baht. So I went from 300 baht to 5 baht. So there's different colors that goes on in different parts of Chiang Mai that are super inexpensive, because the people that takes those the most are the locals. So they're local prices. Now they also have the tuk-tuks, of course, that goes to specific places. That's going to cost you, 150, 300 baht. And then they also have grabs that are really cheap, and they're actually getting really better, have more local buses within Chiang Mai that takes you further outside of the city. So plenty of options in Chiang Mai. Bangkok also, plenty of options. They have tons of public transportation, tons of buses that go everywhere in Bangkok, and Bangkok is humongous. They have the metro system, they have Grab, maybe they used to have Uber, and they have the Grab bikes, which I love. Great thing about being a solo traveler is you can take the Grab bikes, and the Grab bikes are always like half the price of the Grab cars. Super cheap, inexpensive. It is super easy to get around Bangkok, and not to mention the taxi boats, all the taxi ferries. When I stay in Bangkok, I usually stay in like Chinatown or like Riverside, and I can literally just get on a boat and go right across and get into like the metro, like there's hub of the city of Bangkok. So basically skipping like 45 minutes to an hour of traffic. So Bangkok and Chiang Mai, Great for transportation. Again, I'm sorry, I can't speak too much about Vietnam because I just stayed in Hanoi. So when it comes to being a digital nomad, which place do I recommend? I think all three will be amazing to be a digital nomad living there as an expat. Like Vietnam, the Wi-Fi was pretty good. I don't have any complaints about that. And there's also tons of cafes with Wi-Fi access, and there's co-working spaces. But I will say, when it comes to digital nomad culture, I will still give that to Chiang Mai or even Bangkok. Bangkok has huge co-working spaces, but they are a bit more expensive. There's also a lot of cafes and stuff like that. But when it comes to cafe culture, I still have to give that to Chiang Mai. I still think Chiang Mai has an amazing digital nomad culture. The Wi-Fi is amazing there. They have tons of cafes with Wi-Fi. It's still quite inexpensive, and there's co-working spaces and stuff like that. And it's just the networking and the digital nomad culture period is also, I feel like I will give that to Chiang Mai. But also all three I still think is amazing for digital nomad lifestyle, even though I think for Bangkok and even Vietnam, you'll find more people actually just being teachers there, but all three is still a good choice. When it comes to safety, I would say all three I feel relatively safe. I stayed in Thailand for about 4 years, and I think only one incident happened where I was like, when I first moved to Thailand, there was this guy on a motorbike that rolled up next to me and started touching himself or something like that. But that's out of 4 years, so I felt relatively safe in Chiang Mai, Bangkok, and Vietnam. I would say Bangkok is a bigger city, so I probably wouldn't feel as safe walking around at night. I do want to say this, is that I practice common sense and caution. And I know most people might be like, of course, everybody practices common sense when they travel. No, they don't. They do not. A lot of people, especially young people, especially people who are new to traveling, kind of walk around in this utopic travel bubble, and they think nothing can happen to them. They do a lot of things that they would never do back at home, even though the countries that they're in are no safer or more dangerous than a place back at home. I've seen people do a lot of stupid things when they travel. I want to say I felt very safe in all three places, but I practice common sense. I'll make completely separate videos about safety and traveling another time, but let's just leave it there. Social life and nightlife, again, I spoke about this a little bit earlier. I would give that to Bangkok and Hanoi. I actually think, yeah, Bangkok definitely has more options when it comes to nightlife, for sure. They have more options when it comes to different types of venues. You can get really posh, like, clubs, or everybody's like dressed down to the T, or you can get like local little pubs or local little bars, ladyboy places. Like, you can get a different variety and a different price scale in Bangkok. And yeah, so like Bangkok definitely takes it hand down. I would say second in line is Hanoi. Hanoi has an amazing nightlife as well, and it's not just club life. Like, Hanoi just doesn't sleep. Like, it just stays open. Like, you know what I mean? To the clubs, to the bars, to the restaurants, to the convenience stores, to the yogurt places. Yogurt places are really big in Hanoi. So, like, everything just stays open. Life is just still kind of going and buzzing when you stay in Hanoi. So, quick tip. Also, if you're staying in Hanoi in Old Town, you know, look where you're staying, if it's next to a club or something like that, because I stayed next to a club, and some days didn't get a lot of sleep. So when it comes to nightlife, I would say I would give the worst to Chiang Mai. From what I remember, for how it was when I left, there was pretty much the 0 to none nightlife. Like, I know everybody went to like Spicy, but they would close at 11 o'clock. So about the time people would get there, it was almost time to go home. There was a couple of like after party places, but they were tiny, sweaty, hot, and overpriced. It was really no nightlife there. You would basically have to like go to your friend's house and have a beer and stuff like that. But there is a social scene in Chiang Mai, especially amongst expats and backpackers. They even had the Blackpackers that was on Facebook, so they would have events as well for people of color, like barbecues and I don't know, open mics and poetry nights and stuff like that, hip-hop nights. But other than that, there was a good social scene in Chiang Mai. Whether you were looking for something artsy, whether you're looking to have drinks, whether you're looking to have a nice dinner and wine, there was a social scene in Chiang Mai, and there was a community in Chiang Mai amongst expats, if that's what you were looking for. However, everything just shut down really early. So if you didn't mind not staying out late, there's definitely a social scene in Chiang Mai. I would say in Bangkok, I feel like it would be harder for you to have a social group because it's such a bigger city that it might be harder for you to make friends unless you're making friends through your job or your workspace or school or something like that. I do have some friends who live in Bangkok, but I never just like bumped into someone at a cafe or a restaurant and just sparked up a conversation and then spent my whole day with them and made new friends. Where in Chiang Mai, that was really common, just to go out and make new friends off a whim, just spontaneous. You know what I mean? Vietnam, I would say, is more like, even though I did say like Vietnam has a community feel, and I'll explain that in another video, I still would think that it might be harder for you to make friends just as spontaneous as you might make friends in Chiang Mai, unless again it's through your work or through your school or something like that. There is a social scene there, but you have to maybe try a little bit harder and put yourself out there to create a community or a social group. The last thing I'm gonna hit on, people might be asking, is how it is to be a person of color, a woman of color in Thailand or Hanoi. It's perfectly fine. I've made tons of videos about being black in Thailand, and to me, I've never felt like Thai people were racist. I never felt like I was treated any differently. Yes, there's a skin bleaching culture in Thailand, even though I think that is shifting. Like from the first year I stayed in Thailand to when I left, I saw such a difference when it comes to diversity and advertisements and marketing, models that they would use and stuff like that. Like before, when I first got to Thailand, it was just like white as snow, white as milk. That's all you ever saw. And when I left, they were using like black models or Thai people that were like skin color like mine. So like it is changing, but of course it's still a part of the culture. But I think people take that and then think, okay, most Thai people must all be racist, and they're not. They're amazing people. They treat you really well. They will go out of your way. They will go out of their way to help you. So if they're a racist, why would they spend hours helping my black ass, when they have no attachment to me? I do feel like when I first moved to Thailand, people were the locals were a lot more like starey and taking pictures and asking about your hair and stuff like that. I feel that's a lot less now. I feel like they just got used to seeing people of color, and now it's like whatever. If you're gonna find anybody who treats you a little differently, it's probably gonna be another foreigner, whether it's a Western foreigner or an Asian foreigner from another country. A lot of Chinese tourists and stuff like that, Korean tourists. But for the most part, the locals of Thailand, I feel like they kind of like got over it, in my opinion, unless they're from like, you know, the boonies or the provinces or countryside where they don't like get out a lot. But for the most part, where I stay, a very well-traveled area where a lot of expats stay, I feel like they kind of got over it. In Vietnam, I didn't feel that way at all. I feel like Vietnamese people could not care less about the color of my skin or my hair. No stares, no double takes, no asking about my skin. Nobody asked about my hair. Nobody asked to take a photo. Nothing. I feel like Vietnamese people treated me and looked at me just the same as anybody other expat that came along. So overall, I would say that I love all of them. I would much rather, if I had to pick a place to have a base in again, it would still probably be either Chiang Mai or Hanoi. Bangkok is still a big city. I'm not a big city person, but you might be. Those are the differences between Vietnam, Hanoi, and Thailand, Bangkok, and Chiang Mai. I hope this video was helpful to you. I know maybe it's slightly all over the place. I'm still trying to get back into the groove of things, but I'm going to be releasing all of my videos that I've been basically filming for the last few years. I already released my Vietnam video. I didn't get a lot of footage of Vietnam, unfortunately, because it was such an amazing stay there, but I never had a sit-down video about Vietnam. So I'm gonna do all my sit-down videos in between all the other footage that I'm gonna be releasing, and then hopefully in the next month we'll be all caught up to date and we'll be in present day of like vlogs and talking about my life and what's going on today and updates and stuff like that. So if those videos interest you, please like, comment, and subscribe. There'll be a lot more videos to come, so subscribe, and you guys have an amazing day. Bye.